and welcome to episode 13 of Attention Engineer. Kid, a Bristol-based music producer, songwriter and independent solo artist making music as Penfriend. In this noisy world, the gift of someone's attention is priceless. Join me on my mission to go deeper, past the headlines and the hearsay, to have the conversations I've always hoped for with some of the artists I admire the most. This podcast is supported by Arts Council England and the National Lottery and powered by the Correspondent Club. More about that later. Hello there! Is anyone else feeling like they're living in a remake of Groundhog Day? I've been going through phases with this. Even though lockdown is easing in the UK, apparently, I've pretty much still been hiding at home and burying myself in podcast making and album recording and the weekly and monthly things that keep me going. But it's starting to feel like something needs to change. I'm thinking about doing the whole socially distant friends meeting up thing, but is it safe yet though? Really? I'm thinking about it, but I'm not quite there yet. I have started recording the last batch of songs for the Penfriend album though, as promised, so that is fun. Except it's been really humid in Bristol all week and I didn't realise that's why I felt like all the energy had been sapped from my body. At least there was a decent reason. I stubbornly pressed on regardless, of course, and things are taking shape, so I'm hoping to be sending a bunch of files over to my mix engineer Dan Austin sometime this week. Oh yeah, and I did try to live stream some of it, but it took so much time to set up and I felt like I had to narrate the whole thing and all I could think about was how much work I have to do and how much I need to focus on it. So I'm sorry, that's not going to be happening, but I will do some other fun stuff soon. I hope you're doing okay out there, wherever you are. Where are you, by the way? How have you come across this podcast? I would love to know. You're very welcome to send me messages anytime to pod@penfriend.rocks. I set myself up a new email address, specially. Or you can find me around the internet at Penfriend Rocks. Whether you're running, hanging out the washing, walking the dog, or whatever else you do when you're listening to podcasts, thank you for choosing mine today. I really appreciate it. Right, onwards to today's exciting guest. Public service broadcasting is the corduroy-clad brainchild of London-based Willgoose Esquire, who, along with drumming companion Wrigglesworth and multi-instrumentalist JFAbraham, is on a quest to inform, educate and entertain audiences around the globe. PSB's uniquely spellbinding live AV transmissions see them weave samples from old public information films, archive footage and propaganda material around live drums, guitar, banjo and electronics as they teach the lessons of the past through the music of the future, beaming our past back at us through vintage TV sets and state-of-the-art modern video projection devices. Are you ready? Let's go. Well, hello, Willgoose Esquire.
Hello, good afternoon. What should I... Yeah, just hello. Non-time descriptive greeting to you. Hello.
How are you today?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, no real extra detail needed, probably. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm well. Can't complain. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
I'm very warm. I'm in my home studio, which I call the launch pad, and it's become gradually more humid this week.
Yes.
And it makes me feel a bit funny. But it's always a bit funny at the start of a conversation with someone I've never met. But whose work I admire.
Oh.
So first of all, thank you for coming nowhere, travelling no distance at all to talk to me.
Well, virtually travelling hundreds of miles, no doubt. But yeah, thanks for asking me to do it. Yeah, it seems like an interesting podcast and yeah, it should be a nice chat, hopefully.
Hopefully. All right. Well, I was experimenting the other day with a guest, doing some icebreaker questions, and then
right.
I know, and then I thought today, I don't think I'm going to do that with you. I think I'm just going to go right in there.
Okay.
How do you feel about that? So first question, do you want a weird, stupid, pointless icebreaker, or are you just like in for the kill?
I think that would make me feel like I was on some kind of corporate away day trip in the early 2000s. So I'll go with a no, thank you, but polite no.
Yeah, I think that's probably the website I got it off. I was actually Googling for icebreakers and I thought, what am I doing with my time? This is ridiculous. Because what I really want to ask you is, what are you here on the planet to do and how did you figure that out?
Oh, crikey.
Back to the icebreakers.
What am I here on the planet to crikey? This is like, I always found the French interviews to be very existential and difficult, but this is swiftly on a par with those. I don't know. I think I am very fond of George Orwell and his writing, and I think it's the final chapter of his collected writings is an excerpt from Reflections on Gandhi, and it says, "Our job is to make life worth living." And I've always thought that's a very fine maxim for life. So I suppose in your own way, for those you know and for those around you and your family, your nearest and dearest, is to, be a good, reliable person and try and be a force for good in the world and try and improve the world and leave it better than you found it. That would be my waffly non-answer to that.
That's a really good answer. So how do you achieve that through your music? Or how does your music slot into that as a life's mission?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's debatable. Some people would say I'm poisoning the world forever with my primitive noodlings. I don't know. I'm not a very positive person in life. I'm not like a sort of PMA type person who's going to shout motivational slogans at friends and relatives. I'm quite relentlessly pessimistic in some ways because then, everything's a bonus, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's weird that the music and certainly the most successful music that we've released has this kind of thread of optimism woven through it, whether it was kind of, the early stuff and songs about the invention of colour TV or, the sort of the power of broadcast, the power of education, information, entertainment as a kind of public service broadcasting credo, all through, the moon landings and one of mankind's most incredible achievements. There is this kind of streak of optimism and this faith that humanity ultimately is a remarkable but flawed beast, I suppose. And I think that must be in me somewhere, but it doesn't feel like it's very near the surface on a daily basis. So the music is kind of a way of getting that out when otherwise it's hard to draw out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think then that the music that you write rounds out your personality in that sense?
I don't know if it rounds it out, but I would certainly say that I do not feel well mentally if I'm not doing some kind of creative endeavour. And that's not an exaggeration. I genuinely feel like something is missing or I'm going a bit round the pipe. Which is why, having come to be fortunate enough to be creative for a living, essentially, is such a fortunate position to be in. It does kind of place an extra responsibility and extra weight on that creativity because you're relying on it to earn money to live. But you can't really avoid it anymore. You can't kind of beat around the bush and procrastinate and delay. You actually have, you have to get on with it. So it's quite a productive way of fulfilling that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to Tom Robinson for this podcast a while ago, and we were talking about how writing songs is a cheap way of having therapy.
Yeah.
And possibly the best way, although it's obviously self-propelled, which might not be the best. I might not be the best person to help myself necessarily.
No, but what it does do, certainly if it does for me, playing the guitar especially, is it switches your mind into a totally different place. And, there've been times when worries or anxieties or fears or preoccupations they've seemed all encompassing and almost the only way I can find to get out of it is to play the guitar. It sounds cliched and awful, but it's true. There's something about it as a kind of an extension of the body, an extension of the mind that does kind of take you away from your own troubles and kind of into this other place. And it's remarkable, really.
Yeah. Are you aware of the term the flow state? Have you heard about that?
I have heard about it. I think I'm very good at interrupting it, but yeah,
Okay.
I've heard about it.
Yeah, I'm really into that idea because I've felt that so many times when I actually sit down. I have to sit down and make myself make music.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen to me. It doesn't just come in a flash of lightning or anything. But when I'm doing that, there's definitely that moment or those moments where time just flies by and everything feels like it's just sort of working without you in a way. And so do you think that's what is the thing that can take you out of that day-to-day feeling down stuff?
I think so, yeah. I think it's just a total preoccupation in jumping from one thing to another, whether that's, kind of technology-based or more kind of actually physically with your hands, controlling some kind of instrument. I think it's much easier to interrupt that flow when you get into it by having a browser window open on your computer at the same time, which is terrible and really shouldn't. But But actually, the genuine moments where you're so excited by an idea that you can't help but pick it up and run with it, you don't find you want to interrupt those moments, and it just doesn't really seem to enter into the equation. So, yeah, they are few and far between for me. I don't know what it's like for everyone else, but I mean, once a month, maybe at best.
Yeah.
At best,
Yeah. As you've said, your music is your living as well. So looking at your music making as a living, and you said that obviously there's a little bit of pressure that comes with that. Do you feel that you have to show up to work? So even though you might not feel that flow state that often, I presume you're not lying around on the couch waiting for a song to happen in your own brain and then, oh, it's happening now, I'll go up and write it.
No, I mean, there's all sorts of aspects to that question to answer. First of all, I'm not talented enough to just lie around and get ideas coming to me from nowhere. I have to work at it. But yeah, I feel a responsibility. It's not so much like, I need to make sure I earn my crust today. It's more the kind of the weight of responsibility of being one of the extraordinarily fortunate few who get to make their living from making music. It's probably one of the most competitive jobs and industries in the world. Thousands and thousands of people would like to be able to do it. And here you are, somehow you've managed to fluke your way, speaking about me here, not you, you've managed to fluke your way into a position where you are earning a living from it. How has that happened? You'd better hold on to it as tightly as you can and, give it the attention and the weight that it deserves. And part of that is getting up and putting a shift in and, making yourself work in those moments when creativity seems like it's very far from hand, but just making yourself turn up and almost like keep bashing your head against a brick wall until something comes loose, and then you kind of just, you find a way through it. But often the process of actually running up against that brick wall is a key part of creating. It's just quite annoying that it has to be that difficult for me anyway.
I do feel the same way because I'm writing an album at the moment. So this is going to be my 5th one. And even though I can listen back to demos I did 2 months ago and think they're really good and I'm going to record them for the record and that's great. And I know they didn't come out fully formed because obviously they didn't, because they tend not to. Even though I know all that, when I'm writing something new, I still think, why isn't it finished yet? And, I hate it, or I suck at this. Who do I think I am? This is the worst thing that's ever been made by a human ever. But I know that all I have to do is put the more and more hours in, and it will get to a point where I can decide whether it's a song I want to, take further or not. But there's still for me that moment of, what's this? This is rubbish. Do you have that too? Do you have those moments?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, there's far more common than moments when you sit back and give yourself a pat on the back. Pat on the backs are fairly rare. I mean, writing the last record, which is about 95% written now. Said the last record, the next PSB record, but the last one that I wrote, was the toughest yet, and certainly the toughest in terms of just feeling like a bit of an imposter and a fraud and just generally useless. So it was a bit of a struggle getting through that. But thankfully, I think the key deterministic characteristic I have, the key sort of personality trait I have, is just a kind of stubbornness / determination, and just seeing something through until it is actually finished. And it's almost a direct result of a lack of inherent talent that I can kind of fall back on. And it is something that I've seen many of my friends and acquaintances who have far more musical talent than I have almost don't have enough focus as a result, and don't have that kind of determination to get something done no matter what it is, and just finish something. And you kind of just see that they never quite find their thing in a way. They're trying different things, not really getting to the end of one or the other. But I think it is that kind of quiet, stubborn determination that is actually probably the strongest creative asset that I have. Yeah,
I feel the same way about what I do. I don't think I totally suck when I actually put something out, but I'm not trying to be the very best at all the little things either. I think you could be the best guitarist in the whole world, but unable to finish a song, so it's practically useless. Just shredding for no reason. So what?
Yeah, and they're all over YouTube. These people, they're incredibly technically accomplished players, but I remember going to see Paul Simon with my dad, and I think a long time after that I was voicing my my insecurities about not being a technically accomplished musician or what have you. And he said, "Do you think Paul Simon, was the most accomplished musician on that stage with all those musicians?" Of course he's not, but he's the one. He's still the one with the sort of the creative drive and the creative vision that brings it all together and gives it focus. You don't necessarily have to be, playing pentatonic scales age 5. You can be another kind of focus, I suppose, for musical energy, and that's the creative drive.
That's amazing advice to get.
Yeah, especially because he's not normally like that. Oh no, he's very good to talk to. He's very useful sounding board, etc. But he's not a creative person inherently himself. He's not a musical person. So in terms of getting musical feedback from somebody, with the greatest respect to my dad, who obviously I love and cherish deeply, he wouldn't be the person I'd naturally turn to on that front. There you go.
But that could have gone very differently, that conversation.
Yeah.
Do you think you might have been put off for life if he's like, yeah, son, you're no good at this. Go and do something that you can realistically achieve?
I think, possibly. If I didn't have, parental encouragement is so important, isn't it? Even in the face of lack of talent to deserve it on some occasions. Yeah, I think that's one of the most, been lucky in all sorts of ways, but one of the ways I have definitely been lucky is having supportive parents who kind of indulged various hobbies and passions and still do, they still come to gigs when they can. And
that's lovely.
Yeah, they kind of, they're on like the fan groups and stuff on Facebook. It's a bit, you have to just tell them to take a step back sometimes, but yeah.
They just must be so proud though. That's lovely.
It's nice.
It's really nice. So what was the parental reaction to when you headlined Brixton Academy?
Well, good question. I don't remember speaking to them much that night. I remember our dressing room just being, it's not the biggest dressing room at Brixton, but it's big enough, but it ended with you couldn't move, you could barely raise your elbow to drink. So it wasn't the night to have kind of deep and meaningful conversations.
No.
There were a lot of people around. I think they must have been very proud. I don't remember speaking to them immediately afterwards, but that was a very, it was a difficult night, that one, because it was only about, sorry to take things in a heavy direction, but it was only about 3.5 weeks after my wife had major surgery for cancer.
Oh, wow.
It was like her first outing since then. And she was up on the balcony and kind of put things into perspective in many ways. She's still here and well and everything's good, touch wood, etc. But my overwhelming memory of that time is just of being a bit of a sea of emotion and mess, really.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I obviously didn't know about that. So I was going to make a slightly flippant comment about my own mother, which is, it's a brilliant talent she has, and I actually really appreciate this. If I call up with some exciting, to me, news about something to do with my frivolous occupation of being a musician, I'll tell her, and she'll be like, oh, that's nice. And then she'll go, oh, you never guess what happened to whatever. Immediately, there's like half a breath in between, and then she's on to the next thing that's, in her mind, the same or more important than the thing I just said. So there's something really beautiful about that, about being humbled and shown that, yes, of course your thing's important, and it's not to say that it's not, but there were many, many other things going on. And so that night must have been particularly like that for you then. Yeah,
it was. It was. And I remember, because Brixton had been a focus of mine growing up in South London for so long, and thinking that, if we did get to play there, that would be like the crowning achievement, and life would end, and it would just be like, congratulations, game over, you win. And of course, you don't get anything like that. And I remember playing the last song that night and just thinking, oh, all right, well, what's now then? What do we do now? What's next?
Yeah.
And you do end up with almost a semi-empty feeling as well as that feeling of accomplishment. But it's a lesson in not setting yourself up for, unlocking achievements in life as a mindset. It's not how it works.
No, exactly. And I was watching the documentary about Every Valley, and you mentioned that right at the beginning about how you had to think, well, what is next? And that's a really good point to make, because, first of all, do you think that you would have ever played Brixton Academy if that hadn't been a concrete dream in your head?
You might have struggled upon it. You might have chanced upon it. You might have been in a band and kind of worked your way towards it. I don't know, though. It was quite singular. For a long time it felt, even when PSB were going well in the early days, when we did the Forum, I was thinking, crikey, the Forum? What? Forum? Really? The Forum? Wow. That
is big.
Yeah. Wow. I was thinking it's way too big for us. And then, we did it, and then we did the Roundhouse. You're like, what? Really? The Roundhouse? And then the promoter's starting to sort of hover in the background talking about, if you sell this out, you'll do Brixton. You're like, nah, we're not going to do Brixton. So it kind of, it slowly came into focus, even though I was so, on a personal level, I was so driven by trying to get there, I think, just not believing it would happen. But I don't know. Who knows? There's all kinds of weird chance encounters in life that shape your future in all sorts of ways you can't really speak about, aren't there? But yes, I mean, Brixton is the place. If you grow up in London, I think, especially in South London, and you like going to gigs of a certain size, it's just unequalled. And I think it is still for most bands like a rite of passage. It is if you can sell out a night at Brixton, yeah, you've done it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I don't believe in like cosmic ordering or all that sort of jazz. No offense to anyone who does. It's not my thing at all. But I'm really interested in kind of defining dreams. Instead of sort of having intangible, I'd like to do this sort of thing, like an amorphous blob one day. I think it's quite interesting when people can really like drill down to what it is they want to achieve. But then, you do have to have a plan for if and when that happens, what do we do next? And so it's interesting that you were talking about that in that documentary and about how, well, the next thing is to make more things. That's really what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Making things, telling stories.
But also, examining why you're doing what you're doing and what do you want to do with it. Do you just want to keep getting bigger and, more recognised and playing on bigger stages and the byproduct of that is more money, in an ideal world? Or are you doing this for some other reason? And for me, the answer's always been, I mean, clearly, I don't think even our biggest critics would look at it as being cynical. Like, if you're going to start off a cynical band or act, you wouldn't choose such a relatively niche way of going about making music, I don't think.
No.
Yeah. So it's never been about, it's never been about being as big as possible and playing like arenas and stadiums and stuff like that. It's been about having some artistic vision and being able to fulfill that.
Mm-hmm. And so for anyone who's listening who's like, who is this person?
Who's this loser?
Who is Laura talking to?
Yeah.
Normally I'm sure they're thinking the other way around, who's this woman? But how would you describe public service broadcasting to someone who's never heard of it or of you?
I mean, I have to do it quite often, and I've obviously been doing it for many years. I'm still useless at it. I'm absolutely useless. It's kind of electronic music, but with yes, this is how bad I am at it. It's kind of electronic instrument, but with kind of guitars, drums, bass, acoustic instruments alongside it, and it's heavily reliant upon sampled voices or materials gleaned from archives, from films, from documentaries, from poetry, even from writings, from interviews, that kind of tries to weave all that into mini cohesive narratives. That's what it is. But I've already lost most of it. It's normally like somebody who lives down the street who I've met when I'm walking the dog, and all right, mate, yeah, just call it indie or something. That's fine.
Do you know what? I used to call my music gloom pop because I thought that was really descriptive, and I like coming up with names for things. So I called it gloom pop, and I had to explain it for 10 years, and no one really understood or got the nuances of that. They were like, but it's not so depressing. And I was like, no, that's what pop isn't. Gloom and pop anyway. So I just started calling it indie rock, and people just go, oh yeah, cool.
Yeah.
No more conversations.
You need a label. You need a label that they understand. And then somebody did, I think it was an American writer once called us collage rock, which is a nice play on words and also kind of good, description of what we do. Musically as a collage as well as the kind of the audio snippets. So yeah, I've never really managed to make that stick though.
I like it though.
We normally just get called like sample bashers or something. I don't know what we get called. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what you're doing, and that's the most important part.
Do I?
Do you? I have a question about how you make it, if that's all right. I've described it in my questions here because I wasn't sure if I was going to sort of do this as voiceover, but I'm not going to take away from how you've described your music, obviously, but I was going to call it a brilliant blend of spoken word samples from old public information films and propaganda material with live instruments.
But yeah,
is that
great.
Also correct?
You have the job of press release writer. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. My question is, when you're creating that brilliant blend of spoken word samples and live instruments, do the topics and themes come first and then you find samples to support the stories you want to tell? Or do you start browsing samples and find the story emerging from those?
I think on to get pretentious about it, on the sort of the meta level, the macro level. The macro level, yes, absolutely, the theme and the idea comes first, and there's a ground, there's a sort of a ground rock, I suppose, of a framework of reading and sort of trying to get under the skin of the subject and trying to work out what it is about it that you find attractive and what you want to try and communicate. And then within that, on a micro level, you can know, for example, that you want to write a song about Apollo 11, and you can know that you want to avoid some of the more obvious sound bites, like, it's one small step for a man, or however you want to frame that sentence. But you don't necessarily know what you do want to replace it with. You just know you want to try and find a different spin on it. So you can be searching for archive and find, a series of go, no-go call-outs and think, wow, that'd be cool. I think so. So you've already kind of narrowed the focus and narrowed the lens in terms of, what you want to write about, how you don't want to do it. You have an inkling about how you do want to do it, but you kind of need a bit of help from somewhere. And with Go, it was a case of just kind of stumbling upon, some samples that really help tell that story. But in other cases, it is much more, wading through hours of archive material, trying to find something that has a human voice in it that gives some kind of feeling that you are trying to impart by the music as well.
And is there a question over the integrity of the quote? If you found a quote that was almost exactly what you wanted to say, but they were kind of saying the opposite, but if you took a word out, it would say what you wanted. How do you deal with that?
I think you have to judge it on the context. Like, if you are talking about finding somebody saying within the context of our fashion song, which is just ridiculous camp nonsense about how corduroy is the greatest fabric ever, I would have no qualms whatsoever about manipulating a Pathé documentary to say corduroy is the greatest fabric ever, rather than like corduroy is not the great. Fine, I don't care. It's not doing any damage to it. But if you're getting onto much more serious subjects like, the role of women's support groups during the miners' strikes of the 80s in South Wales, it's a good idea not to misrepresent and distort the meanings of genuine, kind of deeply held opinions, I think. So I've always been very faithful with the editing of that. I do edit them. I take out kind of repetitions and stumbles and ums and ahs, and kind of occasionally move a section earlier, but as long as the meaning hasn't been distorted in that process, I'm comfortable with that. But it really is just all about context, I think.
Yeah. I didn't expect you to be completely self-serving there and be like, I take every word and like, quotes like that. But yeah, it's good to hear that though.
It's remarkable how manipulative you can be with it, if that is your goal. But I think at the end of If War Should Come, which is the first track on the War Room, Chamberlain's actual quote is, "We are now at war with Germany." And he ends his sentence like, "We are now at war with Germany." And at my wife's suggestion, just decided to get rid of from with Germany, because you don't want to make it that specific, don't want to kind of antagonize any nationalistic tendencies. So just end the sentence on "We are now at war." But the intonation is wrong. But you can just pitch that down. You can even within the one word "war," you can drag the pitch so it starts at one pitch and tails off. You could do all sorts of very clever manipulative things that in the wrong hands could be quite distorting. But I don't think I've used them for evil. I don't think
so. Getting ready for this interview, I really enjoyed reading some of your blog posts. And I just want to be one vote for more of those if it's something that you enjoy doing, because I'd love to read more.
Thank you. It is something I enjoy doing, but I don't seem to get around to doing it very often. I think they're all right, though. Occasionally I read them back. If I do one, I kind of read down and see, what have I been wittering on about here in the past? and mostly they read fairly well, and they may be a little bit earnest, but they're all right. They're moderately well written, I think. Thank you.
I think things being a bit earnest is good, actually, rather than, I don't know, throwaway or the opposite of whatever earnest is, meaningless.
Yeah.
I think it's good because also it's I think especially because you make mostly instrumental music, or the parts that you're putting on there are mostly instrumental. I just find it interesting, again, that sort of fleshing out of the people who are making this music. And so it wouldn't have occurred to me for a second that public service broadcasting was a right-wing band, but you do address that within several of the posts, I think, about sort of putting the record straight a little bit. And you seem to have become more vocal about your opinions about things in the world over the course of the blog.
More tiresome,
as well.
Yes. More self-opinionated and tiresome.
I don't think that's bad. I think that's brilliant. And I really appreciated that you said that thing in there about how when people say, oh, just stick to the music, that's absolute nonsense, because, I mean, we're people as well as the the bits of us that make the music. So it's absolutely ridiculous to me that you would, take those things separately or separate those things out. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I should really do more. I think in a broader point on that is we've changed management about a year and a half ago, and one of the things that new management, Rob, his name is, I won't just reduce him to a faceless and nameless entity. He said he didn't think we'd always done the best job of explaining or putting out enough kind of contextual detail about the records and showing how much kind of work and care goes into them. And this is from people he's spoken to who really like the records, but feels that there's more to be done in kind of fleshing things out around it to give it the kind of the richness that it has, but that it doesn't always come across. Which I thought was an interesting point, and I think we're hopefully going to try and address that with the next record, if/when it ever sees the light of day, and try and get across a bit more of the surrounding material around it for those people who are interested in it.
I think a lot of people will be. I think that it's great that you can make music that has all these different layers, so you could just listen to it and really enjoy a song. You don't need to know what it's about or how it was made or anything. But certainly, I find that stuff really interesting. And as a songwriter myself, I've definitely, I think I've just put albums out in the past, and I've done everything on my own as well. So it's there's always too much to do, really, to spend loads of time explaining myself. And I also would love a world where I put a song out and people would sort of critically think about what it's about and go, oh yeah, I get that, I understand, and oh yeah, that's really good. Wouldn't we all? But I understand also the need to explain that sometimes, but it's hard to do that sometimes without going, look how great I think I am. Yeah. But I think all of the stuff I've seen from you hasn't been like that at all. It's been done really well.
Well, good. Thank you. That's reassuring to hear. I think there is also, it's a difficult line to tread. And I think the reason we haven't perhaps been quite so explicit in the past in doing it is because the stuff that I like and that I form the closest bond with, I don't know if you're the same. I would hazard a guess that you are, but the stuff that I like most is stuff that initially I've been a little bit confused by / confronted by, and had to kind of ask myself questions about it or form my own relationship with it, and it's had the room within it for me to do that without feeling that I'm kind of being told that this is a particular, that you can put your own interpretation on it, you can bring your own meaning to it, and that is where the real bond between the listener and music comes from. It's not in being told, endless hours of context about this, that, and the other. I think that stuff can help, but within the whole process, you do still need to leave that room for people to come to you rather than you to be constantly, forcing your opinions or you're just shouting your kind of authorial voice at them, because it's not really that relevant when it comes down to, the listener and the music themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right. And audiences aren't stupid people. They do have the ability to critically think about.
They're often treated as if they are. They're often treated, especially on TV and in films. Sort of the ludicrous exposition you get and clumsy dialogue and it's so easy to get rid of it. But a lot of people do just seem to assume that you do need to spell everything out for the kind of, because people won't get it. But one of the things I most like is in stuff like The Wire is if you don't necessarily catch the full meaning of a scene or a line, but you just trust the creators of that, creative endeavor, whatever it is, you trust them that you don't necessarily need to have all the answers now. Things will become clearer, and you give them your trust as a result of that, and it makes the whole process much more enriching and rewarding.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I really hate this idea. I don't know where it's coming from. Maybe it's just this sort of invented idea that the audience for music are just a bunch of people who their only value is to click like on a post online or to buy your thing. And that's so disrespectful, in my opinion. And yeah, I think that people love having a puzzle, and they're very happy to watch very long series on television that are very confusing. For instance, I'm watching Dark at the moment, and it's blowing my mind. It's very confusing, like time travel stuff, alternate reality stuff. But I'm not getting angry that I don't understand it.
Again, that's another fine line to tread, though, isn't it? Because that in itself can become quite a manipulative force, and it can become quite lazy with stuff like Lost. It starts off with an intriguing, intriguing premise, and it works well. But as soon as you actually do need to start further interrogating it and asking questions of it, the vacuousness of it becomes kind of too obvious, I suppose, and it just kind of turns you off. It's a strange balance to strike, isn't it? I think the first series of Twin Peaks for me is that would be a perfect example of how to have intrigue and mystery and moments of like, what the who, but it takes you along with it, and it's it's a fantastic piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of more recent one maybe veered a little bit too far the other way for me. I was kind of a bit put off by how esoteric it was, but yeah.
I didn't watch it. It's not that I couldn't decide whether to or not, and I thought I have a bit of a motto which is stolen from a man called Mark Manson, who writes really brilliant things on the internet and writes books, and he has a phrase which is if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no, basically, which I apply to everything in life. Right. Unequivocally. And so because I was like, should I watch the new Twin Peaks? Is it going to ruin the original one? I don't know. I'm not that arsed, really. I'm not going to do it. So I just didn't do it. So it's not about preserving the original as like a perfect thing, but I just thought, I'm clearly not that bothered.
Fair enough.
And that's, there's not enough time to be bothered about everything, is there? So
no, certainly not.
That was why I decided that day. So post Brixton Academy, how do you define success, and do you experience it regularly?
I think success is probably continuing to have a extremely unlikely career as a professional musician. Do I think about it? I don't know. If you're bringing out a record, you might have your own idea of, if you're aiming for a chart position, what kind of chart position you'd be happy with. If you're aiming for, a certain level of touring or a certain level of production, what kind of level you'd be happy with. I think thinking ahead to the next record and again, when it comes out, and if we can tour it, I don't think we're looking to make any kind of massive strides. We don't really necessarily want to make the leap from 5,000 cap venue in London to everything above that. It's not a great gig experience, I don't think. Not that I'm being arrogant enough to just say, like, yes, we want to do Alexandra Palace, so we will do it. But if it were to be an option, it's not one I'd be particularly keen on taking. I'd much rather do, 2 Brixtons or something. So there's no next level for it. It's more about having artistic aims and artistic ideals for each record and hoping that you can fulfill them. I should also mention at this point, my dog is under the desk and she starts snoring quite loudly. So if you can hear her.
I don't think I can. I wish I could. Mine are normally in this chair storing, but I've got a load of rubbish on it today, so they can't get up. They're outside. She's
not reached peak volume yet, but she might. If she really gets going. It depends if she's got her head over the side of the bed, because that's when...
Aww.
No,
What's her name?
Her name's Dusty.
Hi, Dusty.
She's all tucked up.
I've seen you on the internet.
I think she'll stay at manageable levels, but yeah.
I just sound really creepy. Dusty's in a video. It's okay.
Dusty's
in the documentary.
She is. She's on the Every Valley documentary. She was with us in South Wales. Yeah, the choir absolutely loved her. She had her own receiving line on the way in.
Well, she is royal, isn't she?
Everybody gave her a little tickle and a pat, on the way in.
Is she a Blenheim King Charles?
She is, yeah.
My gran's always had those dogs. They're beautiful. Love them.
She's lovely temperament. Mad for food.
Yeah.
I mean, all dogs are, but she is mad. Yeah.
Does that mean she's really easy to train though, because she's mad for food?
It is when you've got food, yeah. If you haven't got food, though, good luck, because she's just going to do what she wants.
I've got 2 schnauzers, and they both love food, but they also don't really want to do any of the stuff I want them to do. Right. So they'll take the food, and they're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to sit, though. But it's okay.
Yep.
That's fine. I don't mind. It doesn't really affect my life in a negative way.
No, as long as they're not affecting other people's. Nicking their sausage rolls in the park, for example. That's when they get embarrassing.
Sausage rolls. Dusty is a clever girl. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? I really am delighted you're spending this time with me and would love to send you a music-shaped present to say thank you. If you've been enjoying the music in the background throughout this show, that's just a taster of what's to come. I'm working on the debut Penfriend album right now, and I can send you 2 songs immediately if you like. All you have to do is visit my website penfriend.rocks and sign up. A massive shout out today to the members of my Correspondence Club. You are the ones powering the making of my new music and this podcast series, and I couldn't do any of it without you. Thank you so much. Right, back to my conversation with J. Willgoose Esquire. It's time to get literary. I really enjoyed your TED talk.
Oh, God.
It was really good.
TEDx.
First of all, I was wondering if you were going to tell me it was rubbish.
It's not a real TED talk. It's a fake. It's TEDx. It's like
all right.
It's Ted Light.
It was really good because I really enjoyed the correlation you made between live music and Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment.
Well, know your audience, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Because, not only did it legitimise you to a TEDx audience, but it's a pretty unique perspective for a musician to have. I was wondering if you'd like to elaborate on that, if that's something you still think about, or if that's something that's so far in your distant 4 years ago past that you would rather leave it alone.
Oh, dear. Is it all right if I get the doorbell?
Yes, of course.
Sorry.
Now you've got time to think about the answer.
I'll be back in a second.
A suspicious doorbell has rung. I don't know if it's a real one. I think it's just his phone and he's pressed a button and it's gone bing bong. Now he's run away to think about Dostoevsky.
Yeah. Good girl. Come on. In your bed. In your bed. There she goes.
Yay, I can see her. She's lovely.
I had to do the old I've got something in my hand trick, and I didn't have anything in my hand, and I always feel terrible. Sorry, that was my plants. I've ordered some plants.
Oh, nice. What have you got?
They're 2 evergreen shrubs that do well in the shade. I can't remember. One of them is called Skimia japanella or something, and one is Daphne X Transatlantica, which sounds like some kind of remix name. But it's
is that for outside?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, nice. My husband has been furloughed from his job as a music promoter and has taken it upon himself because he's got another. So we've got a couple of rooms upstairs. He has one, I have one, and he's just filling it with plants so that it looks like a jungle. That's his aim in life at the moment, which is a pretty great aim.
It's quite addictive.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah. They're growing.
Yeah.
Literally growing, and then more of them arrive. So, it's going well. It's a good project. Is Dusty short for Dostoevsky? Because that would be so amazing.
No, I mean, I have taken a photo of her with the Brothers Karamazov as if she's reading it, but that's I have made that pun myself, but no, she's named after Miss Springfield.
Okay.
Well, kind of. We both really like the name. Me and my wife, not me and Dusty Springfield. And we also really like Dusty Springfield's music. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
Works out very well.
Yeah.
I know that you obviously just pressed the button on your phone, so it would sound like your doorbell went, so that you wouldn't have to answer this question. But I am going to ask it again anyway because I'm interested. If you'd like to talk more about this link you made between live music and Crime and Punishment.
Yeah, I as much as I kind of made a thing on the TEDx talk about being pretentious and preaching to the choir, as it were. I read that book I think when I was 16 or 17, and it really was a mind-blowing concept that a negative aspect of society can be, and in fact is a necessary result of a positive aspect of society. So in the case of that book, for those who haven't read it, I'll do a very terrible kind of summing up of it. But one of the main points is that crime is an expression of liberty, because if freedom relies on the capacity to be free to commit crime as much as anything else, and in a society without any crime, you must also not have the freedom to commit crime. So it's an expression of liberty in a way. Obviously, one that's going to end up denying you your personal liberty, probably, but your capacity to commit that in the first place is a reflection of wider freedom in society. And I thought that was, that really kind of almost like an oxymoron, but it does make sense the more you think about it. And thinking about our approach to live music and how, it's not just turn up and press a button and everything plays perfectly every night. There are a lot of trapdoors built into it and a lot of fail-safes that I really should put in that I just can't get worked up about doing. And, I sometimes think, if I miss that bit, then that's going to loop. I should really have a way to stop that. And I don't. So you just have to be, you have to be well practiced, you have to be present, and you have to be, you have to be on it, really. And I think that's a good thing to have to do in a live electronic music setting is not just to, fire clips off an Ableton grid and, maybe you press the wrong button and you play the wrong clip, but who cares and who notices? But to actually have some genuine peril at the heart of your show, like, if you don't play something the right way, if you don't play it in the right place at the right time, it will go round and round for the rest of the song and it will be obvious. It's just about ways of having you need to be able to distinguish between a good gig and a bad gig. And if every gig is just you turning up, plugging your laptop in, pressing play, how could that possibly be the case? You have to build in potential for error, potential for, catastrophic error in some cases, in order to create the possibility of having a good show as well. It's the flip side. In the same way that crime is the flip side of the positive freedom that we enjoy, the ability for things to go terribly wrong is the flip side to having a kind of live and adaptive and, spontaneous in some places show.
I really love that, yeah. You alluded to a good gig experience and a bad gig experience in terms of going from a pretty large venue to even larger ones. So what to you is a good gig experience? And are you talking about for you, or are you talking about for the audience?
For the audience, 100% for the audience. I was lucky in many ways that when this started to actually go reasonably well, I was already nearly 30, so I'd had a far... it's not like I was 18 and never been to a gig, or 21 and not been to that many. I'd been to so many gigs and seen so many people doing things that I liked and didn't like, that I already had a good idea of what I would enjoy as a punter at our own shows. So you can kind of do things with that in mind. Mm-hmm. Things that might seem trivial to you as a performer, but as a punter, can you get there whenever and still get a good spot? Can you get to the bar easily? Can you get to the loos easily? Is it too crowded? I never liked the Astoria because it was always rammed. If it was a sold out show, that you just couldn't move. And Hammersmith, when it's sold out, is too busy. You can't get there whenever and just kind of sidle down the side. But Brixton, there always just seems to be there's a little, everyone who knows, but you just work your way down the right hand side of the left hand side, and then just gently sort of trickle inside, and before you know it, you're behind the second barrier and you're away. And if you need a pint, you can get out and get one. It's easy. So yeah, stuff like that, and also just being in the crowd at larger gigs, arena gigs, where it just feels all too impersonal and too far away, and the music starts to feel a bit cynical as well, and you start to feel like they're writing things to fit this purpose and to fit this crowd. That was one of the most interesting things about that David Byrne book for me, the How Music Works. I don't know if you've read that book.
I've started it a few times and really need to.
Well, I think it's in the first chapter, yeah. But he says,
right.
Music is written for the environment it's going to be performed in,
yeah.
which is why church music sounds a certain way. It's why African rhythmic music sounds a certain way, and it's why stadium rock bands have to write these kind of songs that connect on this enormous level and become simplified in some ways, because they have to kind of bridge this gap that you have between the stage and the back of the venue, which could be half a mile away. I thought that was really fascinating, and I think you do see that with bands who get big enough to fill those places, is they feel the need to fill those places with suitable anthems, for want of a better word, and it's never really to the credit of their music or their art. It's kind of, it feels like a bit of a cheapening of it, and I kind of just want to avoid that if we can.
Whenever bands play those enormo domes, I kind of feel like it's because they don't want to play several smaller shows. But I just feel like it's like, well, we're just going to have to, try to make as much money as we can on one night. That's what I always think.
I don't want to be too, condemn. I don't want to condemn them too much. Let's not try and look for the noun. I don't want to condemn them too much because, maybe they'd rather try and play to as many people as possible and not disappoint their fans. If you see Radiohead doing the Roundhouse for 3 nights and just getting absolutely dumped on left, right and centre, because they're Radiohead. Why are they only doing 3 nights at the Roundhouse? They could probably do 50 nights at the Roundhouse easily. You're just disappointing fans. You need to realise and represent the reality that you're actually in, and not just kind of stubbornly play smaller venues for 70 quid a ticket. I don't want to condemn them too much, but there are the odd cases like when the National did the O2, that was fantastic, because they're not a band who kind of wrote big anthems for those occasions. It felt like it was organic and natural, and it felt like, yeah, go on, have a go at that. Not in a patronising way, but go on, have a go at the O2. And I think they sold it out or came as close to as possible. And when you see things like that happen, it gives you a bit of faith that there is a way to do it organically and naturally and with integrity. But those cases seem to me to be kind of relatively few and far between, sadly.
Yeah, I'm always keeping an eye out for success stories that seem real, where I could see myself perhaps one day achieving some of that. So someone like Frank Turner, for instance, playing gigantic places solo or with his band, I think that's really cool, because it doesn't seem to me like he was like uber famous and then went solo and then pretended he had to play in someone's living room or anything. Like, there doesn't seem to be any artifice to that at all. And having spoken to him for this as well, like, he's just this really good person. And I like meeting those ones, because I've met lots of not good people in music. And
oh, really?
Yeah, I just really like that that thing where someone's success can inspire you and you can feel really happy for them. So maybe in the same way with the National. I was always really pleased when Elbow seemed to be doing like bigger and bigger shows. It was really cool.
I've got a lot of time for Elbow, a lot of time for them. There are the odd breakthroughs that do that, but then you do, for every one of those, it feels like there's the band who, I won't name any names, but maybe they have a idiosyncratic debut album. They follow it up because they've kind of worked the game out a little bit with the second album with a couple of radio-friendly singles. And then they really work the game out and they write like the monster single that takes them to, just takes them to another level forever. And maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe that's what they're in it for. And good luck to them. But it feels a bit cynical from some people. I don't really feel that was the case with bands like... You couldn't accuse Elbow of being cynical. They've been how many times have they been dropped before their first record finally came out? Yeah.
And didn't they just change the name? Did they send exactly the same album out to all the same labels but change their name? And it wasn't Elbow because they've been given the elbow by so many people. Yeah,
they were Mr. Soft. Was it Mr. Soft? Was that their name? Something like that.
I just love stories like that.
Yeah.
And it just shows, just that kind of the grit and determination thing seems to be way more important than being able to shred perfectly on command.
Yeah, definitely. Which
is good, because I definitely can't do that.
Well, you've been touring with Tricky as a bass player, though. I can't imagine your chops would be bad. Like, you must have a level of technique that gets, that's because that's a session gig, isn't it?
Yeah.
You must have got that gig by turning up to an audition, playing for musical merit and getting the gig.
Yes.
So you must be pretty decent.
I'm not saying I'm rubbish. It's just that I think that in terms of my own solo stuff, though, having to do stuff completely alone, and that's harder because, I've talked to lots of people for this podcast. I've talked to lots of musicians in the years I've been doing this, the many years, and it just seems to me like there was a time where if a company would spend £1 million on you, you would become a household name, and that is why you were. And the way you would stay in their consciousness and stay selling records is by being good, but it was the £1 million that got you to that point. So now, in a time when that probably wouldn't even work, or maybe it does, I don't know, or that world is so far away from my experience, it just feels like the perseverance part of it is the overriding thing. And really, I suppose, deciding, as I did a long time ago, that I wanted to make music for my whole life. I'm not just trying to get to a certain thing, or I'm not just trying to prove something to someone who said I couldn't do it once when I was at school or something, although that is nice. I do like doing that as well. But I want to make albums consistently until, for some reason, I don't want to. And I hope I don't not want too many double negatives. I hope I want to till I'm really, really, really old. Because I think it's interesting to hear people's experiences as they age and have, hopefully interesting lives. So it just doesn't make sense to me that I would do it as a younger woman and then not do it later. I'm in this for the very, very long haul. And that sort of defining of success for myself is important, because if it's not connected to what my values are as a human being and the way I want to live my life and the way that can contribute to my albums and the way my albums can contribute to my life, then it sort of doesn't really make sense. It's just kind of like some weird hobby, or, it is my job, but it's like, it shouldn't be my job. So I'm trying to think, like you're saying about these stadium bands, how do I sell more records next time, but not with music that means anything to me? So I'm not trying to beat the system or solve a puzzle or whatever. I'm just not interested in that. So it's more about, continuing to make music that is true to what I think I should be making, and then finding the people who like that. And yes, it would be great if that number of people would at least stabilise, if not grow, because then that just makes everything easier. And I'm in a wonderful position where I think that is definitely stabilised over the past 5 years.
That's great.
And I'm immensely grateful to the people who continue to support that and who are listening to this, because some of the audience for this is those people. That's why I'm really interested in other people's sort of definition of what success is and what are they trying to do. Because you don't strike me as someone who's doing this to just tick off Brixton and then do something else, like go and work in the city or, I don't know, whatever.
No.
No.
No. No. No, thank
So when
you.
did you first know that you wanted to make your own music? How did that happen?
I don't know. I mean, I was in a, this preposterous sentence to utter, but I was in a band with my brother and we were 5 and 7. So, you know, and that band consisted of pressing the demo button on the keyboard, and singing some awful lyrics along to it. So it's not,
wonderful.
Yeah, those will never see the light of day, I do hope.
Thank goodness for VHS over YouTube, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Thank God for non-digital forms of archiving. They're actually in this room. My mum gave me a bag of old stuff and they're on cassette in a bag in this room, but I have a very good alarm system, so don't think
Dusty.
Yeah, well, yeah, she helps. I don't know. I think the main catalyst really was hearing Oasis age 14. That was the light bulb moment. And then from then on, I can't think of many times when I've not been either in a band or making music from that age, and that is almost 2/3 of my life now, I think. So yeah, is that bad maths? It's nowhere near 2/3 of my life. I'm 38 now, and that was when I was 13, 14. So it's a long time, but yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I often joke. And I'm not always joking that the 90s had the very best music ever. And then sometimes I do the maths and go, I've got to stop saying that. It's a really long time ago. It's 25 years ago is what I'm talking about. But it's always interesting to hear people's light bulb bands, because I would not have connected you with Oasis in a million years.
Well, I kind of take that and I'll be flattered by that, I think, because I do think they inspired an awful lot of derivative and not great music. But at the same time, I think it's easy to forget now, looking back on them and looking at how kind of turgid some of their later albums became. But that was a really exciting record. Definitely, maybe it was really exciting. It was so loud. It was just like it wasn't really like anything else indie wise that was out there at the moment, I don't think. I just remember hearing, I think it was Bring It On Down, which probably wouldn't make many people's top 10 Oasis tracks, but it's kind of the drums that start that track off, the feedback that starts that track off. It's just thrilling. And once you've had that moment of being thrilled by music as a teenager in that kind of very visceral way, there's probably not much hope for you in terms of, staying in a band for the rest of your life. You're probably going to try and stay around it one way or another.
Yeah. People do drop off over the years, though, don't they?
They do, but then, people stay in covers bands. I look at loads of people I used to play in bands with, they're still doing something one way or another. They're still driven at some fundamental level by their love of music. It doesn't go away, it just kind of changes form, maybe.
Yeah. How would you say the internet's impacted your career, and what's your relationship with smartphones and social media? You're rolling your eyes. So
relationship with smartphones and social media is it wasn't rolling my eyes, it was looking up and away. I spend too much time on my phone like millions of people. And I don't think it's good for me or good for my word. Is it all right if I can't
It's that fake front door again. Go for it.
There might be more plants, who knows?
Every time there's a difficult question, he's off.
We'll be back in a sec, sorry. Come on then. Come on. Go and see what it is. In your bed. In your bed. Come on.
Dusty. 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 Dusty.
In your bed.
Hello.
There you go. I had to actually get a real treat for her that time, because she would have spent all day staring at me otherwise.
She's earned it. She
has, yeah. Yeah, she has. I think my relationship with smartphones is probably like millions of people the world over, in that it's I find myself spending far too much time on them, and I don't think it really improves my quality of life or my mental health particularly, and I really should put it down more often and not pay any attention to it. But in terms of how the internet has affected our career, I think the way we got to a certain level of success in the UK is by having backing from radio at Six Music, which, for whatever reason they picked up and ran with it and people responded, which we'll be forever grateful for, and by playing hundreds of shows. We did about 155 in 2013 alone. So, we kind of did it the old-fashioned way with radio and with touring. So it wasn't like we was kind of the Arctic Monkeys or something, one of these bands whose history is forever associated with some dreadful long gone platform like MySpace or something. But at the same time, nobody kind of picked up the first EP, and nobody really came forward for the first record with a convincing enough offer to make us think we shouldn't just do it ourselves. So it did give us the power. The War Room EP went out via Bandcamp, and it was just me doing it. I posted over 500 records from my front room, and CDs as well. And, a lot of the time I'd be writing like notes to people in them saying, thanks a lot for ordering this. And it just allowed people to find it and support it in a way that previously you would have been, I know punk bands did it and certain underground scenes would do it, but it allowed people without those connections to underground kind of mechanisms to still support something that was, far outside the commercial sphere. And it didn't rely on a gatekeeper to be saying yes or no to it, to let it through. So much as we kind of blossomed via old-fashioned methods, I think it was definitely augmented by the ability to just do stuff ourselves and to kind of, to still have a good reach via the internet doing that, not having to just rely on kind of niche underground scenes in that way. Yeah.
And so how many of your records have been on labels?
The last album and the last EP, so that's Every Valley and White Star Liner, both went out via Play It Again Sam Recordings. And the first EP, The War Room, the first record, Inform, Educate, Entertain, and The Race for Space were all on Testcard Recordings, which is a long name for just me, basically, or me and my then managers, So and thankfully those records did, for indie records, they did really well, and they've kind of given us the foundation to be able to do commercially unpromising things like make a record about the history of South Wales coal mining, or what we're going to subject people to with the next one, So it's having that flexibility to do it ourselves and not be giving away terrifying percentages of any potential profits to a label. Really did kind of free us up in that way. But yeah, it was all a happy accident, really, like so much of everything to do with this group. Yeah,
I think maybe a lot of hard work also went into it, but the happy accident part's nice as well.
Yeah, I think, to paraphrase, the harder you practice, the luckier you get, that kind of thing. The more hard work you put in and the more connections you're creating, the more likely you are to be able to take advantage of that luck if it does come along. So there is definitely that side of it, but you still do. You need those lucky breaks at some point, and we definitely had them. So yeah,
that's really good to hear. I always like to think of it as like, be ready. So if something amazing happens, you're like, yes, I can do that tour, or yes, I can whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely seen artists I know be given opportunities and not do them. Maybe I shouldn't say that. They're probably not listening.
No, you definitely should. You don't have to. Yeah, they don't know you're talking about them. Yeah.
I've heard stories of people I don't know having things offered to them, and they said no, and I'm just like, what?
I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but wasn't that the famous Sex Pistols TV appearance was only because it was something like Queen couldn't do it.
Oh, really?
So they booked the Sex Pistols because they were around, and they said yes, and that that was it. They were off.
That's brilliant.
But it's being in a position to go. Yeah, definitely. It's a big part of it. Being ready on all sorts of fronts. Yeah. You never know, do you?
No. It's the kind of thing that parents, if they had any idea of what it was really like, would just be like, don't do that. Please don't do that. Mine never actively stopped me. They were always supportive in the sense that like they'd drive me to rehearsal, or they'd let us rehearse in the living room, or they'd let me have like all the bass amps under the bed and things like that. Store all the PA system around my room for my teenage band and stuff like that. But I'm sure if they knew what, the amount of hours and the sort of disappointment and crushing sadness that comes along with it when it's not going particularly well, I just think you have to be sort of mentally strong, or try to be mentally strong, to keep getting up and keep trying every day.
Yeah, that goes back to sort of perseverance, doesn't it, I suppose?
Yeah.
But having said that, what you just said reminded me very much of listening to Daniel Kahneman's Desert Island Discs, and he was, I was going to make it sound like he was part of Stock Aitken and Waterman or something, but he was one half of Kahneman and Tversky, who are behavioural economists who, laid much of the groundwork for behavioural economics, I suppose, and he won the Nobel Prize for economics as a result. But one of the things he said on Desert Island Discs, for those who haven't heard it, is that there aren't many metrics for predicting happiness in life, apart from if you choose to pursue a career in the performing arts, you are definitely more likely to be unhappy. And that's one of the few concrete things he could tell you about studying happiness, which was quite an eye-opener. Maybe if your parents had heard that, they might have been less keen on encouraging you with the bass amps. I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing they didn't hear that. It can be so nebulous as well. Well, first of all, how insanely competitive it is, and how many thousands of people want to do it and they're just not going to succeed. They're not going to make it. And for many years, I was convinced I was one of those people who would, have to face up to a life of not achieving what it was that I hoped I would achieve. And then even if you do kind of reach some level of successes, I really do struggle with the nebulous nature of writing, and of sometimes feeling like you don't really have a real job, and you don't, you're just kind of playing at being a musician, or I love doing a gig because there's a set aim, there's a defined target. You play a gig to this room of people, try and make them have a good time, and play your instrument well. Job done. You've actually had a job to do today, and you've done it. But if you're saying like write a song, and you've spent 2 weeks trying to do something, and basically you've got like 5 notes that are rubbish, it can just feel very dispiriting and like you're some kind of fraud or imposter. I do struggle with that side of it. I much prefer touring to writing, definitely. Yeah.
Can you even start thinking about touring again? Is that just all on pause?
What do you mean in terms of the current situation the world finds itself in? Well, we've had to, because everyone and their uncle is currently planning to tour from the middle of next year onwards. And we hope to have a record out in September next year. So if we don't book the dates in now, if we sit around and wait and see if it could happen, then we won't have a tour to do. So we've got a tour booked. We've got dates in the diary. I'm trying not to let myself think about them too much, because I don't want the crushing disappointment of having to postpone them. But I don't know. I think I'm more optimistic now than I was 2 months ago about the whole thing. I think remarkable things are happening. I think as bad as our response has been on the governmental level, I think scientifically there are all sorts of amazing things going on that you don't hear enough about. And I have discovered many reasons to be positive. So I'm going to try and stick to those and hope and assume that we will be able to play these songs off this next record, because it's been a labour. I wouldn't even say a labour of love at times. It's just been a labour to get the record written. We had to postpone the recording sessions, all sorts of stuff going on logistically, and stuff that you don't want to get bogged down in when you're trying to be a kind of creative kind of being, I suppose. You don't want to get bogged down in the sort of stuff we've had to get bogged down in. But it'll be a tremendous release if and when we do get to perform these songs live. And in fact, it might be overwhelming, I think, for me. I'll have to watch the emotion level on stage, I think. Yeah, I'll have to see about that one.
I'm very, very excited about it. I'm not going to ask you any questions about it, because I think a delicious secret is better anyway.
Well, it's a secret, yeah. You're being very kind with the delicious. We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
I'm a fan of secrets. Now, I'm just going to ask you a few short questions to finish, if that's okay. That's okay with Dusty. If Dusty's, it is one of them. Yeah, oh damn it, I've got one fewer now. What are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading? Well, recently, after many years of prompting by my wife to have more than one book on the go, and me stubbornly clinging to just one, I've discovered the benefits of having a book downstairs and upstairs.
What? This is a new idea to me.
If the opportunity arises, there is a book there, you can just read it. So like at breakfast sometimes, if I have a spare 10 minutes, I'll just read the downstairs book, and it's there, and I've read 15, 20 pages, done, no probs.
Does that mean, though, that you're segmenting your books into what's suitable to read before bed and what's suitable to read in the morning?
Not really, because the one I'm reading before bed is Carlo Rovelli's "Reality Is Not What You Think It Is," and it's the journey towards quantum gravity, and it got into some quite mathsy stuff last night, and I mean, I was not the audience for that at 11 o'clock last night. So yeah, it's not that sensible. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm reading, not to try and sound clever, because I'm definitely not, especially when it comes to quantum mechanics and quantum gravity, but that is one of the things. And the other one is, Economics, the User's Guide, a Pelican Introduction by Ha-Jun Chang, and trying to just educate myself about an area in which I'm totally ignorant. So that's what I'm reading downstairs.
Cool. Very good. I'm reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
I saw you post a quote from that earlier today, and it was seemed very apt. Very, very good.
Well, yeah. I do always ask people about success in this podcast if I get around to it, because I do think it's really interesting, especially in a creative career. And no one so far has said, success is $1 million and nothing less, because I'm not talking to people who are like that, so that's good. But yeah, I did post this quote earlier. I'll read it out now. He says, "I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do and go on to carry it out to the best of your knowledge. Then you will live to see that in the long run, I say, ! Success will follow you precisely because you had forgotten to think about it." And the bit I love about that is the first line, actually. The thing about, I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do.
I loved the last line.
Yeah.
Because it mirrored what happened with me in this band, because I'd stopped this. I wasn't even thinking about being in a band and trying to, inverted commas, make it.
Yeah.
I was just doing it for fun, and I'd stopped even considering it as an option or a goal, and then it happened. So it did strike me as, yeah, that's how it struck me.
Let me let you get on with your day in just a minute, but I'd love to know who your current favourite artists are.
Well, that is a good question. One of the ones I've recently discovered is she's called Juana Molina, and the record of hers that I'm a big fan of is Halo. Not that I'm looking this up at the moment as we speak, because my memory is dreadful these days. No, but Juana Molina, she's got a really interesting story. She's from Argentina, I think, and she was one of the country's kind of most well-known actors, and acclaimed, doing very, very well for herself, and then basically just decided she didn't want to do that. She wanted to become a musician, so she came out with her record, and I think was quite widely mocked back in Argentina for it, and treated, as I imagine a lot of women are, when they kind of make bold moves like that. And actually, she's kind of met with a lot of critical acclaim outside Argentina, and she now lives in LA, I think, and she makes this kind of slightly strange kind of lolloping. It's kind of part electronic, part guitar-driven music. It's really interesting. There's one track of hers called Kosoko, I think, Cosoco, and it's just wonderful. I can't recommend that enough. I reckon it'd be up your street, actually. Give that a go.
Okay.
Who else have I been listening to? Quite a lot of Tangerine Dream. Yeah, which I was hoping would rub off on the record, but it hasn't at all. It's like, if I listen to enough of this, I'm sure it'll just seep in how they made it sound. I'll just work it out and it'll just happen. But it hasn't. So there's that. And the third one would be Kelly Lee Owens, who is a Welsh, I guess you'd say techno. I don't know if it's techno. It's intelligently put together electronic music. And I think her stuff is great. I really liked her first album, and she seems to be just gearing up for her second one coming out, having postponed it from earlier in the year. So, I'd recommend her. So, yeah, those are my three.
Thank you very much. And which three pieces of your own work would you recommend as a gateway for new listeners?
Objectively speaking, the most successful / best song I've written is probably is Go. So I'd recommend that. If you wanted to hear how things got started, maybe sort of Spitfire was the song that really got things going for us. And if you want to hear where we kind of ended up, or like a logical an illogical extrapolation of that. So, listen to a song like You and Me from the last record, because it's a long way away from where we started and how we started doing things. It's a very, very big departure. No samples, no electronics, just two vocalists and and one guitar, one bass, one drum track, bit of strings and brass. There you go. It's not what it used to be, certainly. Which is good, I think. It's obviously going to put some people's noses out of joint, but I don't care.
Yay, good. I'm glad you don't care. You shouldn't care. What you're doing is brilliant, and it's what you want to do, and that's the point. So.
Thanks.
You knew that already. You don't really need me to say that.
No, yes.
Oh, I have side question. When you had James Dean Bradfield singing on your song, how on earth did you keep the fanboy off your face when you shot the video? Because I know that must have been a big thing for you because you love the Holy Bible.
Well,
right?
Yes. I mean, I love the Manics full stop, but yeah, the Holy Bible was, that was the formative teenage musical experience for me.
But you looked fine in the video. You looked fine. You looked like, oh yeah, so what? It's just a guy. No big deal.
Well, I'd already had to get over it by then because, we'd been lucky we'd supported them a few times. And then I asked him to sing on the song, and then had him demoing the song. And then, then he came to record it. And I think it was really when he came to record it and I was producing him recording a song for our album that I had to have a word with myself and just be like, stop being overawed by this situation and stop, telling yourself, oh my God, James Dean Bradfield singing, oh my God. And just, you've got a job to do here. He wants to be told how to deliver this in the way that you want him to. He wants to be treated like a musician, an incredible musician, but he's not coming in here thinking I'm just going to sing this once and then I'm off. Just get on with it. Treat him like a musical peer, even if you find that hard to believe. So I already had to jump over that hurdle in the recording, and it is still strange, having him as an acquaintance. I'd hesitate to say friend. I don't want to be presumptive, but it's really strange. It's wonderful, but if it was me and the other way around, and not that we would ever assume that kind of importance for anyone, I don't think. But if I found myself in a similar situation, I wouldn't want to. You don't want to be fawned over. You don't want people to tell you how great you are. You just want to get on with it. So I've always tried to just be like that with him and with other people who I've met who inspire me. Just kind of get on with it. Don't blow any smoke anywhere because they've had that for countless years and they're extremely bored by it. So just don't do it.
Tom Robinson said a really clever thing in his podcast chat about meeting celebrities or people that even not necessarily celebrities, but musical heroes or whatever. He said, if you open the conversation by going, I love your stuff, you're brilliant, there's absolutely nothing they can say back other than thank you. And it's like, that's the end. Mm-hmm. So he was just like, you just need to open with a question or, maybe just sort of assess whether you really should be bothering them at all.
Yeah.
But obviously the situation you were in, like telling yourself to maybe stop sweating so much and get on with it is a really good move.
Yeah, I think it worked out all right in that case.
It's a brilliant song as well.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm still terrible at taking compliments, so I just kind of try and duck and roll out the way of them. But I'm
trying to make you practice in this just in a short time.
It's still, he came on stage with us when we played Blackwood Miners Institute, and he came on for the encore. I mean, that was just
wow.
I couldn't quite get the fanboy out of the way there because it was like, oh my God, the energy in the audience. The energy on stage, he's such an electric performer, and to be alongside him, with all the kind of context associated with Blackwood Miners Institute and what the record was about, and that was quite overwhelming. But I think that was legitimate.
Yeah.
And then we moved on to a song about dancing astronauts after that. So
very cool.
God knows what he thinks, leaving the stage and then there's two astronauts waiting to come on.
Well, it's a different night out for James Dean Bradfield. That's what you gave him that day.
Yeah.
The last question I always ask on this podcast is, what's your next adventure? And sometimes it doesn't necessarily seem appropriate because of the times that we're in. But what is your next adventure?
Well, I've had to put the public service broadcasting record on hold because we can't physically get to where everything is. So I've been digging out old synths in the back of cupboards and sort of doing a very hardware-based kind of side project, I suppose, and it looks like that might actually get released. So, that's what's next, I think. I don't know when, but I need to finish it by the end of this month because then I need to kind of start getting my head back on the next PSP record. So, hopefully there'll be some kind of slightly weird oddity that comes out as an offshoot of these times, and it'd be nice to have something creative to look back on in what was a very unsettling time.
Brilliant. Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing that. It's really been so lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for asking. Cheers.
That was so much fun. I've made a deluxe show notes page with links to Public Service Broadcasting's top tunes and videos, Willgoose's music recommendations, and everything else we talked about. Visit penfriend.rocks/PSB for that. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to my series. I have 12 more interesting chats with brilliant creative people for you to dive into, and lots more on the way. New episodes are released every Wednesday, and I am honestly pinching myself at the people who keep saying yes to doing this. This is a completely independent production, so your ratings and reviews make a massive difference to getting Attention Engineer into more ears. Thank you so much if you've done one already. Next week, I'll be sharing my conversation with Sadie Dupuy, aka Sad13, who you might know from a band called Speedy Ortiz. Till then, take care and thanks for listening.